married to decent times, but this girl's got you on her mind. Something about your walk, talk, smile so bright, kinda something like my kryptonite. I'm not easy, believe me, but I know what I want. You're special, original, so let's have some fun. You're staring and I'm daring, I'm so ready to die. Bring your body real close to me, pour a lot of romance. What's your fantasy? You and me tonight. Let's let the trace. You and me tonight. Rock waves. You and me tonight, baby.
What's up, guys? It's your girl Phoenix Novell. Thank you so much for tuning into another Musicians on Gigs episode. In this episode, I will discuss what it was like booking and managing artists. Overall, what I loved about booking and managing artists was the fact that I enjoyed being able to create and secure contracts with companies that I felt artists would want to be associated with. I think that was the most exhilarating part of it, to create the kind of gigs and the atmosphere that I myself as an artist would be ecstatic to be a part of. So that was amazing. It was amazing for me to be able to not only scout these artists, to find them, but to be able to allow them to create the kind of show that they wanted. Like I was never interested in just booking artists to perform cover songs and just like, be on a stage for a certain amount of time, get off, and that's it. I wanted them to be able to create an atmosphere that they themselves felt like they were bringing their artistic skills to the table. We all do when we sing cover songs, where we're in bands, we're still bringing ourselves to the table. But I encouraged artists to perform their original music. I encouraged them to go out and get clothing that represented their style. I encouraged them to be original. And it was fun because when you're a cover band artist, you can get so caught up in pleasing the audience and giving them what they know that you can lose yourself in that, especially if you have a desire to be more than just that, and a lot of artists, they do. A lot of people who sing, a lot of musicians, they're usually composers as well. They're usually also interested in performing their own stuff or writing, and what better atmosphere to practice in than on the platform that you're already in. Of course, I didn't just let them perform anything without me scouting it and properly doing the transitions and making sure that it will work without being so jarringly different from what the venue requested from us. But I loved the idea of allowing them to like enjoy a little bit of the spotlight, that wasn't just because they were great singers or wasn't just because they were covering songs that the world loved, but because they were actually able to hear the crowd respond to their music, their dance moves, their style, their skill set. So that experience was the most exhilarating part of it all. I learned booking artists that, even though I'm an artist myself, if you're the boss and if you're the one that has the contract and you're the one dealing with the client, you're going to have to maintain a certain level of space between yourself and the other artists. It was hard for me sometimes because I was jumping on stage with the bands. It wasn't just me from off stage critiquing them or telling them do this, don't do this, and just being a manager. I was also up there with them, a part of the team. And there's just moments where you're being teammates, where you have to take that hat off because you're a part of the band. You're a part of that unit. And sometimes you want to vent. Sometimes you don't like the way management is treating you or the client has things going, and you have to know how to take that hat off, but you also have to know that you're responsible to make sure that the band is doing what they're being paid to do, to make sure that that both parties, the client and your artists, are living up to the terms and conditions set in place. And you sometimes have to be the heavy. When a client isn't doing what they're supposed to do, you have to deal with it. When the artists aren't doing what they're supposed to do. So if you're too close to the situation to really be able to do your job properly, it's going to backfire on you without a doubt. So I had to learn that the hard way. I was way too much of one of the gang versus really being the boss, because when it was time to be the boss, I noticed sometimes I wasn't really respected or taking as seriously as I would have liked to been, and it was mostly my fault because I allowed those boundaries to kind of be like vague. So that was probably one of the harder parts, just not really being able to maintain that balance well. I did not manage that part well. Managing artists was also a little complicated because I was on stage with people. I looked up to them. Like if I really loved your talent or I thought you were an amazing performer, I was not afraid to say that and let you know that. So to be also a performer, not that you're looking for competition, but you're in a situation where you guys have to either, if you're not on the same level, if you're not bringing the same amount of performance capability to the stage, people will notice that dip. They'll notice that when you perform, you're not really as energetic, or they'll notice that you're not really captivating the crowd or really delivering a song. So even if you're not necessarily competitive, there may be a sense of, this person isn't that great. That could eventually at some point seep into your mind or whatever. Because we're sensitive as artists. We're sensitive as people, but we're also sensitive because we want to be liked. We want to be the star. We want somebody to notice us, and we want to feel like we're bringing something to the team that the team doesn't already have. So there were times where artists would come to me as their manager, and they would ask, so what does the client think about me? Or do you think I'm this? Or I feel like I'm not really doing this, or I feel like I'm not. So I had to deal with them, first removing the way that I saw them in my eyes. Like I had to get past from, I might have really adored and I loved and admired this particular artist, but I had to deal with them from the perspective of somebody who was employing them. It was hard sometimes because, they were trusting you with their vulnerabilities, and you had to be very careful with how, you can't just say, oh girl, you're fine, or dude, you're fine, you're amazing. Like you had to actually make them feel heard, and you had to be careful and delicate because you were the one that booked them. And sometimes, even if you thought they were amazing, they wanted to know what the client thought. They wanted to know what the numbers were looking like. They wanted to know if they would be somebody who the client would want to fight to keep, when their contract was up. And so I had to, at moments, sometimes be critical too. Like, all right, well, the client said this, or you should work on this, or I think you're amazing, but this. So there was sometimes I had a little bit of difficulty doing that, sometimes being really direct about it, because some people can be really fragile and misinterpret what was said or think that they're not as good as somebody else. So that was a little tough for me. What else was tough for me was, because I'm the kind of person who I'm an artist, like I said, so I think in terms of the comfortability of an artist. I think in terms of what could affect the show. And if I think something could affect the show negatively, I will do everything in my power to avoid that situation so that there's no room for excuses. I need you to be able to have time to focus on perfecting your performance so that when it's showtime, you have no room to say, well, this happened and that's why. So for me, I don't like putting artists together. I don't like artists sharing housing quarters, because there are so many things that could go wrong in a housing quarter. And sometimes artists just need to feel they have a little bit of distance between themselves and other bandmates. So if you're always around these people, if you live with them, you work with them, you rehearse with them, you eat with them, it can be draining as, to the point where it's just like, I just want to go because I can't. And you don't always click or gel with everybody you work with. So creating that sense of space, and then you can connect and you can, visit each other all day and all night and go eat if you want to. But I like to create that choice. The things that we do when we're living with other artists, some of us, we just have different rhythms. Some of us are party animals. Some of us are very, focused, and we like to sleep, and we're very serious about our downtime, and we meditate or we pray or whatever, or we go through periods of just long vows of silence or whatever we do. But if you put all these different personalities in one space, there can be a lot of phone calls to management or complaints, or I want to leave, or I don't want to live here, or you need to move me. And so you're trying to figure out how to mitigate this situation, that if you just allow people to have their own space or sense of separation, they probably wouldn't have to deal with. You can deal with working with people like that because at some point there's a relief. 3 o'clock, I'm packing up my shit and I'm going to my room, and I don't have to see you again until 12 o'clock tomorrow noon for rehearsal. Like, there's a sense of this isn't going to last. But if I'm constantly looking for ways to avoid you, or somebody's not washing their dirty dishes, or somebody's constantly have guests over their house and you hear them having sex with somebody, or they're smoking where they should be smoking, all of these things could affect the show. Because if you're not coming to the show fully, with your, well slept and properly had rehearsed and all that kind of stuff, you're coming with all this stress on your mind, then this is an excuse for you to not really show up 100%. And I don't like to create any room for that. So there has been times where I had to pay more money, or I lost the contract because the client did not want to house the artist individually. So there are situations where you're just kind of like, all right, how important is this? But some things, like I said, it's just, I know how detrimental this particular situation could be if I don't make this a very important point for me to take a contract. So that was tough a few times with clients, like, well, that's going to cost more than I want, so you're going to have to come down on this end. That could be rough, because some agencies will put you all together. Some agencies will like divide it nicely, or put you with the same type of person, or allow you to choose your roommates, amongst yourselves. But I'm the kind of person where that's just what I like to do. I don't like to have artists in one housing quarter. It saves money, but it can create a lot of nasty interactions that could then spill over into the work environment. Another thing that I've learned about managing and booking bands is that sometimes people just don't want to be there. They might like the idea of traveling. They love everything looks good on paper. They look great in the videos. The performance is right. Their voice is spectacular. Their skills are amazing. But they get over there and they're not a good fit. They don't want to be there. They're not vibing. The atmosphere isn't right. The client doesn't like them. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And there's nothing you could have done to prevent that, because you didn't see any of the warning signs. You have to be prepared for that, for the possibility that they might not like this experience. They could be homesick like a mug. They could realize that they really don't want this lifestyle, and then they just want to go back to what they always known. They realize that they're much more stage fright than they thought they were. They realize that they are not, that they can't withstand the schedule of performing, even though they thought they could. They've never done it before sometimes, where it's like you're working 4 hours damn near straight sometimes, and you're not only are you singing your own songs, but you're doing other people's backup songs. So there's a lot that goes into it that you won't know until you go. And so sometimes you're legit taking a loss, where it's like you're paying for this person's flight tickets, or you're orchestrating this and the client isn't happy with them, but it's a loss because nobody saw it coming. But you can't blame anybody. You can't tell them they got to pay their own way if you fire them, and it's just because it's not a good fit. So there are just some times where the client isn't happy with the talent isn't happy with the gig, or the location, or the terms, or they get homesick. There's just this room for the possibility that things just won't work out. And if you prepare for that, that you can do all of your due diligence. You can cross your T's and dot your I's and do everything that you need to do to get the right artist there, but then they get there and it's just not gelling. You know, so that's hard when it comes to booking artists. And I'd say what I learned is that talent isn't everything. Talent is a huge factor. That's what gets you in the door. What keeps you in the door is the way you treat people and the way people feel about you. So I've worked with singers and other musicians who were not the best at what they did, but because people like to work with them, they kept the gig. They kept getting gigs. They kept getting bookings. They kept being referred and recommended for gigs because they were so pleasant to work with. They were team players. They helped out. They were versatile, whatever. It was about their personality and their attitude. You have a lot of talented people who get the gig, who are impressive, but people can't stand them. They don't like to work with them. They don't like to look at them. They're divas or divos, and I've learned that it's better for me to have more people that I like to work with, that I can bank on having my back, you know, if something goes wrong and not trying to backstab me or whatever, versus me having a lineup of amazingly talented people who I don't really trust or I don't really like their personality or character. It's much more of an asset to have artists, to work with artists who are talented, but not necessarily like superstars, who are good-hearted people and really easy and great to work with. So that's what my experience was managing and booking artists, and I hope you guys are able to take something from this video. If you have any questions or topic ideas or suggestions, please feel free to email me at musiciansongigs@gmail.com. Thank you guys for tuning in, and please stay tuned for the next upload. Peace.